Knife throwing can be a fun skill to add to any martial arts training. In this video, we're going to show you how to make a target, we'll discuss throwing knives and various modifications, and we'll share numerous techniques you can use for throwing those knives. The first step in learning how to throw a knife is to build a throwing target. Throwing knives in your drywall is a good way to get in trouble with your wife. Throwing targets that are made out of planks use less wood and are definitely cheaper to make. The problem with this type of target is that you have to cut the grain in order to stick the knife or the axe. This would include targets like throwing it into the side of a tree or into a wall. With an end grain target like a log round, the blade will actually slide between the fibers, allowing it to stick more often. They're also safer because it absorbs more impact, reducing bounce back. This type of target is also much better for sticking a wide variety of weapons like knives, axes, ninja stars, even garden shears. This will be very important for some of our future videos. Lumber's pretty expensive, and we didn't want to spend a lot of money on something we were just going to destroy with knives and axes, so we set about our properties looking for various pieces of scrap wood we could make a target out of. Some of the boards on the pallet were so rotted that we could just tear it off with our bare hands, but that made it easier to get to the boards that we wanted. Also, after cutting off some of the rot, we found that a lot of the wood was still usable. We kept reminding each other we're not building a rocket ship, we're building something that's meant to be destroyed. We set all the usable wood off to the side and made a plan. There were a couple of good wooden blocks that we could use for the center of the target, and a couple of 2x4s that we could cut up into little pieces to be the same length. There were also plenty of planks that we could use to make up the frame of the target. The next step was to take the blocks we had set aside for the center and use them to measure and cut the 2x4s. No measuring tapes for us, remember, we're not making a rocket ship. So our construction motto was measure once, then destroy it. We quickly realized we weren't going to have enough wood with just the 2x4s, so we found a couple of scrap 4x4s that filled in the empty space quite nicely. Once all the pieces were cut, we lined them up on what would be the back of the frame and realized we needed more 4x4s. Now that we're able to fill in all the gaps, we can get the dimensions for our frame. No measuring tapes for us, remember this isn't rocket surgery. For the back of the board, we used wider planks. We then used smaller planks to create supports for the back. Then we fastened everything with screws to make it easier to take it apart later. We then connected the side of the frames to the 2x4s that made up the corner of the target. Then we connected the back of the frame to the same 2x4s. Finally, we took the puzzle apart one row at a time and glued everything together. Our goal was to make a target roughly the size of a human torso. Now that we're done, here comes the fun part. We get to test it. To help preserve an end grain throwing target, it's a good idea to soak it before and after you use it. We're just going to use a simple spray bottle full of water. This helps to soften the lignin that binds the wood fibers together. Not only will that help the knife stick better, but later when it dries, it'll help seal the holes. The next thing to discuss is the type of knife that we'll be throwing. Knives that are made for throwing are designed to be evenly balanced. You'll notice that the handle of the knife has the same thickness as the blade of the knife. Most throwing knives are also designed with venting or holes in the handle to create drag at the back, allowing the blade to travel faster than the handle. Most throwing knives are also designed where the point is even sharper than the edge. In the case of these knives, you'll notice a false back edge, giving an even sharper tip. Common knives are designed with a much heavier handle to make them more comfortable to hold and use as a tool, especially this Bear Grylls knife, which has a hammer built into the end of it. You're going to have to compensate for that weight when you throw the knife. In the beginning, you might want to start with professional throwing knives and then work your way up to these. By gaining experience throwing different types of knives, you'll eventually be able to throw anything, like screwdrivers, butter knives, or garden shears. With the typical way of throwing a knife, the knife will move in an arc before you release it. Newton's first law says that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. That means that once you let the knife go, it's going to continue to spin. A half spin or a full spin throw takes advantage of this, but you have to be at the correct distance, which can be hard to judge. With the American no spin throw, you push the back of the knife down so that the rotational force moves it to be straight. To accomplish this, you line your finger up the back of the handle and then create a brushing motion as you release it. When removing the knife, push it towards its edge first, then back towards the spine to lever it out. Never push sideways. When picking up the knife, make sure to grab it from the handle, not the blade. If you're holding a knife in the other hand, it could cause injury. Keep the tip pointing to the ground to make it safer, and be mindful when passing it to the throwing hand. Don't stab yourself if you're holding the knife with a reverse grip. Keep the blade aligned with the forearm with the edge pointing away so you don't cut yourself. Remember, always be mindful when passing the knife to the throwing hand. To increase the longevity of the target, give it a good spritzing before you use it and keep it wet during the duration. This will soften the wood to make it easier to stick, and then later when the wood dries, it'll seal the holes. In the beginning, it's easier to take advantage of gravity and throw the knife downward. Don't throw it into the dirt because that can damage your knife. Instead, just lay your target on its back. When you're ready for more of a challenge, increase your distance and angle the target up a little bit. By having the target slightly angled, you can pretend like you're still throwing down towards the ground. It's been a long time since we practiced our knife throwing, so we're far from being experts. If you're also a beginner, don't get frustrated, just keep practicing. Hopefully you'll experience the same progress that you're seeing here. It's all fun and games till someone loses an eye. Never throw a knife to your partner or at any living creature. Never hand the knife to your partner point first. Hand it to them handle first with the edge pointing away from your hand. The safest way to trade the knife would be placing it on a table or letting them retrieve it. There are numerous advantages to training with a partner. First of all, it makes it more fun to throw knives with a buddy, as long as you do it safely. It also helps to have someone from the outside acting as a spotter. They can help give advice on your technique as well as give you an idea on how your knife is hitting. If you don't have a partner, you can always set up a camera. We found it extremely helpful to go back and watch our technique while we filmed this episode. The advantage of video is that you can slow it down and really look at your technique and the path of the knife. Once you can consistently stick the knife from a short distance, it's time to back it up. Not only will you increase the distance, but you're also going to increase the angle of the target so you're more throwing straight forward. The number one difference you'll notice between Josh and Jeremy's technique is that Josh had his right foot forward throwing the knife, while Jeremy has his right foot back. The stance you use isn't as important as the straight path of the knife. If you're having a hard time throwing it from the further distance, take a step forward and try it again. Once you can hit consistently, take a step back. The further your distance from the target, the harder you're going to throw the knife. You can either throw it harder just using your arm, or you can add a step to increase momentum from the body. As you move out to further distances, you're going to need to lift the target up off the ground. Our next video is going to cover modifications you can make to the target and even to the knives. Here's a few things we learned from our experience in making this video that can help you too. Knives with a heavier handle will tend to over-rotate. It will just take practice to gain the sensitivity on how much you need to compensate. When going from a heavy-handled knife to a lighter knife, the tendency can be to overcompensate, and that will make the knife under-rotate. In the beginning, it can help to train with knives that have a consistent weight. However, you should make it a point to train with a variety of knives so you can learn to have the sensitivity to compensate for any weapon. Our next goal is to make the target easier to transport. To make handles, we cut some strips off an old tie-down strap and then sealed the ends with a lighter. From there, we just needed a couple of screws and some washers. Our next goal was to lift the target off the ground. I found a couple of expandable poles from an old pull tool. Not only will this allow us to adjust the height, but also make the target level on uneven ground. We mounted the poles to the back of the target in the shape of a V with a couple of U-brackets. It'll be easy later to just loosen some screws and remove the legs if we need to. From there, we just needed a third pole to place up in the top of the V, and we have a tripod. To reinforce the attachment points, we removed the screws and then put some wood glue in it. This will help hold the screw and harden the wood around the screw hole. Next is a Russian style of no spin called SKANF. The mechanics of SKANF knife throwing is very similar to Tai Chi power training, which is what drew us to this style of knife throwing. The mechanics of SKANF knife throwing are very similar to the mechanics of a catapult. The arm of the catapult will draw back and then stay straight as it launches forward. A sudden stop of the arm then launches the ammunition towards the target. Similar to the Tai Chi power training, the movement starts by turning the hip and loading the weight into the spring of the back leg. When you release the power, twist the hips and allow the momentum of the body to pull the arm forward. Repeat the exercise, going faster each time, trying to be sensitive to where the snap happens in the movement. That snap is where you'll release the knife. When the technique is done correctly, it should feel like you're pulling the knife, not pushing it. You'll know you got it right when you can hear the impact and the knife sticks in straight. It can be a good idea when throwing at a longer range to practice with the tennis ball first. Get the feel of launching the ball with the motion of the catapult and not the power of the arm. If you're lined up with the target and the throw was straight, the ball should bounce right back to you. If the ball misses the target or if it bounces off in a weird angle, there was something wrong with either the rotation of the body or the release of the ball. You should practice this method from various ranges to get the feel of both the power and the timing at those ranges. We base the distances of our throwing range to the Tooler's principle. That states that if someone has a knife, they could cover 21 feet before a gun could be drawn and fired. We set our close range mark at 7 feet. Our theory is that if you're closer than that, you might as well be stabbing them with a knife and not throwing it to them. Our next mark we set at double that for 14 feet. You'll notice that there are also some natural landmarks for the ranges in between. We were definitely having a harder time getting the knife to stick from that 14-foot range. Anything further than that, they'll probably just see it coming and dodge it. Long range for a knife throwing competition is set at 15 feet anyway, so we figured that not being professionals, these are good ranges for us to start with. You'll also want to be mindful of the backdrop for your target. In this case, we set the target up about 10 feet away from an 8-foot tall fence. The knife throwing skill that you're seeing in this video is actually a culmination of numerous days of getting out and throwing the knives at the target. We're still not at an expert level, but you can definitely see the improvement. If you're not sticking the knife at first, that's okay. You can hear the impact of the knife, so regardless of what part of it hits the target, it's gonna hurt. And you're also eliminating the ninja Easter egg hunt. The important thing is to keep practicing and have fun. Eventually, you're gonna get better. Next, we'll show you the Chinese sword throw. It's a versatile style of no-spin throwing, but once you get used to it, allows you to throw a wide variety of weapons. Throwing a sword in battle may not be exactly as you had imagined it. With a Chinese sword throw, you hold the weapon in a forward grip and then throw it at your opponent as though you're tossing it to them. Hold the handle with a loose grip and the thumb pointing up the spine. Keeping the arm straight, swing the knife back, tensing the muscles in the chest. Then release the tension and swing the arm forward like you're throwing a bowling ball. A sudden stop will cause the knife to slide out of your hand and fly toward the target. If you did this right, you should be able to walk straight towards the target and grab the knife. Again, this style of throwing lends itself to a wide variety of weapons. We had both found that throwing axes was very easy with this method, partially because of their weight, but also because its shape lends itself to sticking in a variety of ways. Choosing what side of the axe you stick with is as simple as choosing how you hold the axe. This style of throwing also works if you reverse the grip and throw it more like a dart or a spear. The key is to have a nice loose grip and just let the knife slide out of the hand. You can also add a tassel to the back of the knife to create drag and encourage the tip to fly first. As with any skill, it can take hours of practice to get good at it. Having a friend or watching yourself on video can help correct your technique. With lots of hard work, you'll gain confidence and eventually the skill will be easy. In the process of editing the video, we got a chance to learn a lot from our technique. Here's some of the tips that we picked up. How you hold the knife is very important. The knife should point straight so that the tip lines up with the wrist. If you keep everything straight when you release the knife will fly straight. If the grip is too tight, the knife will tend to be perpendicular to the forearm. Now, instead of the knife just sliding out of my hand, I have to let it go. This causes me to lift the handle and makes the knife over-rotate. The path of the arm will affect the flight of the knife. The arm should make a straight arc ending towards the target. If you pull your arm across the body, the knife will fly weird and it might even stick upside down. Without enough power, the tip might bounce off the target or barely stick. Too much power can cause the knife to rotate and hit sideways. If the power is just right, the knife will fly straight and stick deep in the target with a satisfying thunk. Sometimes the reason the knife doesn't stick isn't your fault, it might be the fault of the target. Remember, we weren't building a rocket ship when we made it. I would call this a good stick. The Chinese sword throw is a sneaky way of throwing a knife. Most people expect to see the knife drop back before you throw it. But in this case, you're throwing it from your side below their eye line. A more subtle throw will decrease the chance of them dodging the weapon. If you've been watching our channel for a while, your mind probably went to the same place as ours did when we started throwing knives. What if you attached a rope to it? The rope itself creates drag at the back of the knife, encouraging the tip to fly first. Also, because the rope is attached to the thrower, they don't have to walk to grab the knife, they can just pull it back. Another simple modification you can make is to attach a tassel or a scarf to the end of the knife. One advantage is that it makes the ninja Easter egg hunt a lot easier. The tassel also makes the hilt heavier and creates drag at the back of the knife, encouraging the tip to fly faster. This makes your no-spin throws a lot easier. However, you do have to be careful how you hold the scarf when you throw it so it doesn't get caught in your hand. Making modifications to your knife can be a fun way to add variety to your knife throwing training. And then later you could take the training wheels off to increase the challenge again. Non-spin throwing is very effective for beginners because you don't have to worry about distance. The problem, however, is gaining enough power for longer ranges. Rotational throwing, on the other hand, utilizes centripetal force to add power to the impact. This makes it easier to stick the knife from a longer distance as long as you've got the distance correct. For the half rotation throw, you'll want to hold the knife by the back of the blade. Make sure the edge is pointing away from your hand. When the knife is released, it should make one half rotation to where the point is going towards the target and stick in. For a full rotation, you'll hold the knife by the handle. This time when the knife is released, it should make one full rotation till the point goes to the target and then stick in. To use either of these techniques, you need to know the right distance to throw from. For the half rotation, you'll need to start fairly close to the target, maybe 2 or 3 paces. Throw the blade and watch how it hits. Be careful of bounce back. Depending on how the knife hit the target, you'll have to adjust your distance a little closer or a little further away. In this example, you'll notice the hilt of the knife hits first. He's a little bit too close. He'll take a little step back. Now it hit by the edge. Still a little bit too close.
That's almost it.
Takes one more step back, and now it hit right with the point. That's the right distance. If you feel like this is the right distance, make a mark, and then count how many paces to the target when you go back to grab the knife. Now take those same number of steps back to your mark and throw it again.
Too far away.
If you can consistently stick the knife from here, you've just found your half rotation distance. You can now use this measurement to measure out your long distance throw for a full rotation. Double your paces from the target and try throwing by the handle now. It may not be exact, but it's going to get you close.
Edge, back up just a little. Almost the tip, back up a little more. There was the tip.
Once you're comfortable with the single spin, can you now go another increment of your paces, hold it by the blade, and then get 1.5 spins? Can you then add another increment of paces, hold it by the handle, and do a double rotation? If you play around in all these different ranges, your eyes will learn how to measure the distance and know the right time to throw. For us, the learning curve on this style of throwing was a lot shorter because this is the style of throwing we've been doing since we were young. We obviously watched too many Rambo movies. Here's a couple of tips that we learned from going back and watching our technique. Make sure to push your hand forward and snap your wrist when you release the knife. Don't drop your elbow or change the path of your hand. That will make the knife fly funny. Your distance from the target should be the same regardless of the length of the weapon, with a few small adjustments. After hours of practice, your throwing distance will start to become more instinctual. From longer distances, you'll need to generate more power to get the knife to the target. You can add your body weight to the power by taking a step to your throwing line.
Yep.
Once you're familiar with a wide variety of throwing techniques, it's time to start playing around with some tricks. The key with tricking is that the technique doesn't have to be perfect, but you're trying to make it more instinctive. As with any skill, you're going to have to try it numerous times before you can pull the trick off. Trick throwing can also be a fun way to break up monotony. When you're training a new technique and you're just not getting it, frustration can sit in and your technique gets worse. Remember that knife throwing's supposed to be fun, so when you start feeling that frustration, take a break, do some tricks, and then come back to it. Try throwing from a reverse grip. Grab a bunch of different weapons and try a different throw with each one. Try walking away from the target, towards the target, or running by the target. If you're walking towards the target, be mindful of bounce back. Slightly more challenging would be to throw one weapon and then draw and strike with an alternate weapon. No matter what trick you try, please be safe and have fun. You've seen our poor target take a lot of damage. As we mentioned earlier, we were making something that was meant to be destroyed. But being cheap, we really do want it to stick around as long as we can get it to. We wanted to share some of the easy repairs we did to increase the longevity of the target. The target took a lot of impact, especially when we got to the heavier weapons at the longer distances. So much so that it actually loosened some of the blocks. It wasn't such a big deal because the knives were still sticking even though the blocks were moving, but we were starting to lose chunks, and if we picked up the target wrong, we were going to lose some of those blocks. We were able to take advantage of some of the loosened blocks by flipping the really badly damaged ones to their unused sides. Unfortunately, the center blocks had taken so much damage that we didn't think there was much use in flipping them over. At least it's a good sign of our increased accuracy from our training, but some of our knives weren't sticking because they were landing in the empty spaces. So we just used some scrap wood to fill in the empty spaces and also to drive in as shims to tighten up the blocks. Our final step was to add some wood glue around the shims to secure them in place so they wouldn't just slide out. We also added glue to the spaces between the blocks. As the glue dries, it's going to drip down between the empty spaces and bond the blocks together. Sometimes there's the tricks you try to pull off to make yourself look cool. Then there's the ones you pull off on accident and they still make you look cool. If you've thrown a knife hundreds of times, you're going to end up getting some really weird sticks. For instance, hitting with the tip of the weapon isn't so weird, especially if there's a spike there. But if the top of the axe is flat, that is weird. One of the most common of the weird sticks is when the knife's stuck by the edge. You expect a knife to stick by the tip, but when it sticks by the edge, that's a little weird. This one's so weird, I can't even explain it. The weirdest one we got was the handle stick. Listen to the impact and look at the dent that it left behind. Tell me you want to take that to the forehead. As with any skill, it takes practice and proper training to get good at it. So make sure you look for a good school in your area. If you're in Southern Oregon, contact us for our locations and times. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, like it and make sure to share that with a friend. Click the subscribe button and then hit that notification bell so you can catch our next exciting video.